What's up is down, what's left is right. Chasing stars and holding you. I can't see the end, but we'll see it through.
Hi, my name's Faye, and I'll be doing a training today for you. It's called Keeping Hope While Fighting for Change with Faye Seidler. That's me. That's the picture. That's who you see in that picture. I'm an activist in North Dakota, and I'll be talking about ways that we can frame our work to keep hope and be resilient while we try to make the world a better place. So to get started with that, I'm going to be talking about my bio. Who am I? Who is talking at you? That is me. I'm talking at you. So I'm Faye Seidler, and here's my resume. Now, a lot of people have resumes that are about their accomplishments and how good they are, and you should hire them and pay them quite a lot of money, but I'm doing something different. And my resume is going to be about my failures, because I think that's a more interesting conversation and a better place to start when we really want to connect with each other. So the first thing to tell you is I am a high school dropout. I did not make it through high school. I experienced a lot of bullying growing up. School was not a safe place for me, and I was very depressed and disillusioned and didn't really think I would live that long. Anyways, so school was not a big priority for me. So for a lot of the work I've done as an activist, you can see a picture of me where I've won an award based on the work I've done for youth across the state. All that came from the humble beginnings of dropping out of high school. However, I worked really, really hard, and I made something of myself, and I moved on to bigger and better heights, and I actually dropped out of college too. I went to college for a semester, half a semester really, and I was working full time. My day off was a 9-hour day because I had to work full time to afford it. And as I went to college and tried to learn and kind of improve myself, I was around a lot of people who were there not so much to learn, but just because it was a thing to do. I went to college when I was about 20, so a couple years after high school, and a lot of people around me were just folks that were surfing by. I didn't really feel like I fit in or belonged there, and I didn't last very long. So I ended up dropping out for all those different kind of reasons and ended up never being able to go back. So for all the stuff I've accomplished and can talk about throughout this training, I just want to let you know this is where I started from. And the things I accomplish aren't because of things you will find on a prestigious resume. They are things that you can accomplish when you're someone who cares. And that's a lot of what I like to talk about in my trainings, because everyone is so much more important than they really often realize. And how much you can contribute and how powerful you can be in movements of change, there's no real limit to that except for yourself and where you find yourself. Besides those experiences, I also experienced homelessness when I was a young adult. I couch surf. I had nights where I didn't really know where I was going to sleep, and this too was part of my experiences. So to recap some of that, I have dropped out of institutes of education and had no real money for the work I do and how I started out. Which is again to frame that people really can accomplish whatever they like to without any real background or any real starting point beyond the will to want to make the world better. I also survived 2 suicide attempts across my life. I am a suicide prevention advocate today, and a lot of it's because of my personal experiences and seeing how people can fall through the cracks. A lot of my work now is to make sure other people have hope and resources and avenues for support so they do want to be here tomorrow, because a lot of my life I didn't. But I have known hopelessness. I have known despair. I have known not having many opportunities or not really being set up for success to get to where I am. I think a lot of motivational speaking is anyone can accomplish anything. And I kind of have that message, but not because I'm great, but because I'm not. And I think that's a more important message to sell to people, especially today in the world that we see today. And then finally, I also have 15 years of low-wage cooking jobs. So just to fill out my resume to show you how qualified I am to be an activist or change maker, you can see it's really not like that impressive, I don't think a large nonprofit would look at this and immediately hire me, yet I tend to be one of the most effective in our state for making change. But for me, the avenues of making change weren't traditional. I had to get involved and get invested with local efforts. I had to get trained by people who knew a lot more than I did, especially people working in nonprofit, how to write grants, how to work with others, and so many other skills and tools that you can just learn by asking people and figuring things out through experience. This is where I've come from. And the icing on the cake for all this is when I was 18, I got a cake that said move out. And while it was kind of a joke, it kind of wasn't, and I ended up moving out pretty soon after. So for most of my life, I really have been pretty much on my own since I was 18, trying to figure out life and eventually getting to where I am today. I think anyone can really rise up and be a change maker. I think that the work we do is always valuable, and I think it's something where we can maintain hope during these times, even when it can feel hopeless, because every time we try to make something better, we can get somewhere. And that's about where my life has been and why I can encourage change in others. So we're looking at my resume there. You can see me and the cake and all that kind of good stuff. And as an activist, I've actually achieved quite a bit. If you don't know me or my work at all, I have done quite a bit within suicide prevention and a lot to protect our LGBTQ plus youth across the state. If you look at the top right, you see a report I put out, which was about 10 years of effort to look at the data that exists for queer youth in North Dakota and itemize a report on that is the most sophisticated data we have around it. The picture just below that, I'm a well-respected trainer who has done a lot of presentations on this topic to audiences that aren't always friendly to it. I was a pride marshal in the Fargo-Moorhead Parade. I am an introvert, and if you ask me if any of this would have been possible 10 years ago, I would have said absolutely not. That is ludicrous to suggest it. But these are all things I kind of moved to because I kept on asking, how do we make the world better? And I kept on trying. And there's other pictures there of awards I've gotten, awards I've given to other people to recognize them, reports I've done with legislative work, and standing in front of our 988 bus, which is our suicide prevention number. The bus is something that First Link, our Suicide Prevention Center, had gotten as the celebration for opening their new place. These are all things I've accomplished. These are all things I've been able to do, regardless of the resume and where I've come from, to show other people that they can get here too. Wherever you want to achieve change, you can get to that place. But to pull that out, to even take that further, we have my resume, we have where I came from, we have the work I've done to get to these outcomes, and you can define them by that. You got the beginning for this, the things that we come from. You got the process in that, and that's the things you do to create change. And then you got the outcomes, the reports you make or the trainings you do. These are the three things you can kind of simplify the process into. And then I have a question for you to answer to yourself. What part is hope? This is a training about hope. It's about keeping hope while we're trying to fight for change. So what part is hope? The beginning, the process, or the outcome? And take a moment. You can pause me and I'll be like, mid something, but go ahead, figure it out. I think that you can argue for any one of those that you want to, right? You can find hope in whatever you would like, but a more important question might be, what part can you control? Because you can't really control the beginning most of the time, or you don't have a lot of influence in that. You can't always control the outcome, but you can always control the process. And I think understanding that is really how we are going to understand how we can keep hope in this fight, because that's the thing that we have control over. And if we align ourselves to the right ways that we can think about this work and ourselves in it to be resilient and hopeful during it, that's how we remain resilient. That's how we remain hopeful, even when the fights can feel impossible. Because every fight starts out feeling impossible. It's through effort that we make things possible. And that's a lot of what my training is going to be about today. So I want you to understand that hope is something we create through the process or effort of trying to make the world better. Hope is the process. It's the process of us trying. Because every time we try to make the world better, we are creating and generating hope. We're showing others people still care. And so long as we're doing that, there is a chance that we can make something better. We create hope through the effort of trying. That is how we can remain hopeful as we tackle incredibly large problems. So I do define hope as the process. Keeping hope requires knowing three things. It requires knowing our walls, our limits, and ourself. And the rest of the training is going to be talking about what I mean when I'm talking about those three things. So we're going to go back to my resume, and now we're going to go to our walls. What are walls? Walls can be quite a lot of different things, but how I'm going to define them is walls are the systematic inequities or barriers within the world that we have to overcome to create something better. Walls are anything that you want them to be that stops you from moving to a better future. So walls can be generally oppression any way you think about it. Walls can be racism any way you think about it. They can be an indifference to the world around us. They can be inequity in any capacity we see it. They can be fascism. They can be anything. And a lot of these things are intersectional. A lot of them are related. But these are all things that are between us and the future that we want. We want to eradicate things like racism. We want people to care. We want democracy and freedom and liberty. We want equity. Presumably, I assume most people want these things. But it really is anything. And maybe it's not these big, grand ideas. Maybe it's a local thing. Like your wall is the indifference of an administration for a city government to build a park to allow people to allow youth to play. Like it doesn't have to be big and grand. It is anything in your path. But when you think about walls, especially bigger ones, like let's say racism or homophobia or sexism or these things that a lot of us have dealt with in one way or another, often when you have that sense of injustice, that the world isn't what it should be, a lot of times we want to tear that wall down as quickly as possible. We want to slam ourselves against that because if we can tear that wall down, we're not going to find peace until we do. We're going to feel anxious and miserable and awful about the world until those inequities fall. But a lot of these walls have been built up over, you could say eons, you could say hundreds of years, you could say human existence, in big and small ways. And what happens is when we throw ourselves at that wall as hard as we can, as long as we can, what breaks usually isn't that wall, it's us. I've seen so many people bashing their head against these walls because they want and need them to change, and what gets destroyed is them. I've seen so much burnout in activism. I've seen so many people crumble against these or even become part of these walls with indifference against some of these efforts because you don't see change. But change takes a really long time. It takes generations often, and we rarely get to see the result of our work. However, if we think about these walls and the ways we apply ourselves to them, you need to fall in love with the swing of the hammer and not the fall of the wall. You need to fall in love with the swing of the hammer. And the reason for that is because you never know when these walls are going to crumble. You have no idea. You don't know how long you can last either. But if you just fall in love with the swing of the hammer, with the process of making things better, you stop caring about when that wall is going to fall down or not because you are doing the work. And so long as you're attacking that wall any way you can, anyhow you can, in a healthy manner over your life, that is so much more important than you giving it your all until your arms break. It's so important that you pace yourself and understand that one person usually is never breaking a wall down. It takes dozens, hundreds, thousands, years, generations. Any way you're contributing to that fight matters. And you have to align yourself to that, and that's how you can keep hope in this fight, because you don't have to beat yourself up for not tearing down these walls yourself. You have to know that your place in this is often smaller than we want it to be, our own sections of walls and all that. However, another important reason why we frame it like this, why we frame it around falling in love with the swing of the hammer, is because once your wall falls down, if you fall in love with the swing of the hammer, you move on to the next one. There's so much intersectional oppression that if we only care about our own issues, the walls in front of us, then we give up once they fall down. We've done it. We've achieved our goals. But if we fall in love with the swing of the hammer, we move on to the next one. We help other people achieve theirs. To find equity, to find people in a society where they can be empowered requires us to support each other. And sometimes our fights are so great that we can't. Like, we don't have time. We're dealing with our own issues that are life and death, so we have to focus in our own community that just is surviving. But the second we find leverage, the second we break down the walls that surround us, that are hurting us, then we can help other people and have more hammers and more folks that try to make the future better. This is a really simplistic way to understand it, and I think a really good metaphor is Shawshank Redemption, where they say geology is a study of pressure over time, and in Shawshank Redemption we see a man who escaped prison after 20 years of digging through a wall a little bit at a time. And this is how change looks and actually happens. You really often don't ever get a wall completely falling down. It's great when it does, but you can't expect it. But if you spend your life attacking a wall and trying to do your best to knock that wall down, after 20, 30 years of that work, you can look from where you started to where you are now, and you've probably done some pretty good damage to that wall. The main point of this whole thing is that you have to take care of yourself, and you have to know that your work is important any way you can contribute it. That's how we survive as we try to make generational change, is understanding our role in tearing down the walls that exist across our society and aligning ourselves to the future that could be better. You have to fall in love with the swing of the hammer, and once you do it, nothing else matters. You just keep on doing your best every day, and enough people doing that is how we create change and actually make forward progress on some things. But if you get so focused on your outcomes and so focused in trying to achieve particular things, you're just going to burn out. It's so hard to operate that way. So that's one way to maintain hope while you're fighting for change. The other one is looking at limits, because in my work, I see a lot of people who self-limit what they're capable of or what they can accomplish based on what they think they need. And there's a way to understand this that I've put together in this whole sub-presentation that I've given in other places, but it's defining creative acceptance. What this means is there's acceptance, seeing the world for what it is. Because I think there's a lot of people that get really idealistic and they say, we'll just heave ho and we'll achieve change. We'll just keep on, meeting in our groups and talking about these issues and eventually things will get better. They probably won't. There are people who say, well, just keep your head up and we'll definitely change the world. And we might not. I advocate for doing our best, but we might not win. That's the reality. We have to do our best and give it a shot, but we don't define the outcomes or the future. Acceptance is really seeing the world for the problems we have and the immensity of them, especially in times like this, because they are big and scary. That's acceptance. A lot of people don't really accept the world around them and how bad it can be for so many people in it. There's creativity, and that's seeing the world for what it can be. There's a lot of folks that are pessimistic to the point they give up. I see a lot of folks that just end up kind of bullying people online because they don't believe anything could ever get better. And that's not particularly healthy. We have to be able to see a possible good future to work towards, or we're never going to get there. If we only look at acceptance, if we only look at the world and the hard black and white reality of what we face and the insurmountable odds that we have, we're going to give up. It looks and feels hopeless. But when we are creative, we can start to apply leverage and change in places we don't always expect. So creative acceptance is seeing the world for what it is and what it can be. And this is a critical way for us to understand our limits and how we can overcome them, because we always can. Everything is impossible until we actually work to make it possible. So here's an exercise with creative acceptance. You and a friend come across a chessboard already set up in the park. This board is missing a few pieces, but you and your friend decide you want to play anyways. How do you play this game with your missing pieces? And I've given a board on the screen for you to look at to see kind of what the board can look like. And I want you to, pause this, come up with yourself, just how would you approach this problem? What ways would you try to achieve a fun game with your friend based on what you got? Remember, you're in a park, so you're around a bunch of different, trees, rocks, foliage, all that kind of stuff. People might be coming by, but you probably don't have too much on you, just what might be in a purse or a wallet. What do you do? How do you play? There's a lot of ways to explore solutions, and that is play the game as is and see which side has more of an advantage. That could be fun. You play one time one way, you switch sides, play it again, see what's going on, see what the game state looks like that way. You can reduce down so both sides have exactly what's missing. And this is both like the acceptance piece. You play with what's on the board, you accept it. You can substitute pieces with pocket change or candy or rocks, and you can invent a new way to play it. You could use whatever you have on hand to make that look like a normal chessboard. You can refuse to play the game and move on, and sometimes that might be the right choice. You can create new rules to the game or a new starting formation so it's more interesting. But there's a lot of ways you can play that game that doesn't have to be the way that we expect or the traditional way that we normally would play chess. We can define our own solutions and recreate the systems and ideas that we are approaching or applying ourselves to. And here's the trick. I'm tricking you. This is actually a magic trick, because I'm not talking about chess, right? I'm talking about life. And when we think about what our board on life looks like, I think a lot of us don't see a lot of pieces on that board, right? Live, laugh, love, this is fine, I'm fine. I think a lot of people see their chessboard closer to that than to being full. And I think we see a lot of our problems or our opponents as overwhelming odds. What strategy could we possibly undertake to beat the current board that we are on, and a lot of people can feel hopeless in this scenario. So looking at the pieces, I didn't have economic stability, didn't have that, didn't have stable family, childhood, high school degree, mental health, a good grasp on grammar. And I still don't have a good grasp on grammar. It's surprising how much of a writer I am, and I really don't understand syntax or breaking apart a sentence. But that's actually really common for writers, I find. I think that we need to not understand writing to have that magic and want to actually get involved with writing, because I find that that's how that's how that normally goes. I do use like the spell checks, and sometimes I recommend I use semicolons or colons, but it's not emotionally honest for me to ever use those because I would never normally use those in real life, so I don't. But those are the pieces I didn't have on this chessboard, right? But I did have a lot of things I accomplished. I founded a clinic a couple years back. I'm a lead on state data for suicide outcomes. I've saved lives through my work. I've won awards, and I can help anyone with a lot of things, but not with grammar. I have had that request surprisingly in my life, but I can help with story structure, but grammar is again something editors get paid a lot of money for a reason, and I support editors. Well, actually, that's not true. As a writer, I fight them tooth and nail, but I acknowledge that they should exist, and I need their help if I want other people to understand the esoteric poetry I've written into prose. So that's where I'm at with history versus accomplishments. To understand creative acceptance, this idea that I put forward here, you have to understand it's not about what you don't have. It's about what you do have and how you use it, how you leverage the tools that you actually have to create the change that you want, because it's probably never going to look like a standard chess game. It is going to always look unique to your situation, your fight, your board, whatever that is. I did not accomplish things because I'm great, and that's how I started this presentation, all my failures. I accomplished it because I asked for help and knew the right way to play the game was not attainable to me. And to this day, I never really play it the right way. I don't do the normal ways that people become an activist. I have kind of always done my own thing because I had to, not because I'm a special innovator, but I had no other choice. I had to figure out how to play an entirely different game than the ones that a lot of organizers and activists do. How you define yourself in your game and how you play it, that's up to you. That's individualistically going to be different for everyone, but you have to give yourself permission to try new things, to see what works for you, to find change that isn't even on the table right now. The biggest mistake in trying to accomplish any goal is believing that there are pieces you need to have and rules you need to follow. Follow the law, like I'm not saying break the law, but just within the convention of social contract and how we relate to each other and try to make change. All you need to be a change maker is to care about something and try. Those are the only two things you need. And then you try things, you reflect on them, you learn, and you do better. That's it. Times that by 10 years or 30 years or your lifetime, and you go from being anything to being a really amazing activist in your community, maybe the state, country, world. It all starts there. Every historical figure has started there to get to where they are now. You have to care, you have to try, and you have to do better. To hammer this home, I want you to raise your hand. Well, this is kind of for in person, but you could raise your hand at home if you want, and maybe someone will ask why, but do it. If you've stopped or not started a goal because you didn't think you had enough money to fund something, to start something, to buy something, you didn't have that, so you stopped a goal that you were working on because you felt like you needed a grant or something like that. You didn't have enough volunteers, so you didn't have enough people that could actually help you run something, so you gave up and didn't do it anymore. You didn't have enough knowledge, so you wanted to create some kind of cool program that could help people find resources, but you didn't know how to do that. You couldn't find someone, so you gave up. It never came to fruition. Time. You really wanted to do something, but you are taking care of an entire family. You have a 40-hour-a-week job. You have commitments everywhere. You want to make the world better, but you do not have the time to do it. I think a lot of people, they've already raised their hand. Organization. So you didn't have the organizational support. You wanted to do homeless. You wanted to work to help homeless folks in your community, but there was no structure to do that. You couldn't volunteer anywhere in your community to do that. So you didn't have an organization. So you just stopped trying. Talent. So you wanted to be able to, create some kind of avenue for people to listen to, the reason to vote, but you weren't a public speaker. You didn't have that experience. So you just gave up. Energy, you're tired. You do have time, but you are exhausted. You have knowledge and talent and all that, but you just don't have anything in your tank right now. Caffeine, the Starbucks closed and you just can't get there anymore. Or support, just from your friends and family, people in your life, you didn't have the support you needed. As I go through these, if I go through them in a room of a lot of people, everyone's going to raise their hand multiple times. And if you think about that, that is dozens and hundreds of efforts and goals and projects that never happened because people gave up. They got to a wall and gave up. But to rephrase this, I want you to think about another way to think about it. Have you ever had one of these things? Money, volunteers, knowledge, time, organization, talent, energy, caffeine, support. I put caffeine in there, so I mean, come on, you've had enough of these at some point, right? Leverage what you have. You might have money, you can get really far with just money. You might have knowledge, you can get really far with any one of these things can build into the other ones. Maybe there isn't an organization, but if you have time, money, and volunteers, you can make one. Maybe you don't have support now, but if you have talent and knowledge, you might get support along the way. Whatever you leverage, you can leverage that into the things you don't have to create monumental change. And that's often how change happens. The walls I talked about before are the oppressions that we face in the world. They are kind of the enemies that we want to defeat to make a world better, or ideas or concepts, all of that. When we think about these ideas I'm going through here, they're kind of the same thing. They're pressure over time, but for yourself. You have to be able to keep on going past your limits to create things that you don't think are possible right now, but you can if you keep on working at them. So I want you to understand that you cannot guarantee success. You can't. No matter how good you are, all the support you have, you can't ever guarantee that you're going to be successful. However, you can work towards anything. And when you do this, you will always be surprised at what you can accomplish when you focus on opportunities and not limitations. That's what creative acceptance is. It's a path forward. It is effort over time. Effort over time, as applied to oppression, breaks walls down. Effort over time for yourself builds skills up. These two ideas are ways that you can keep hope in this fight because you can always improve. You can always get better. You can always make change and get more hammers swinging at that wall that will actually start to tear down some of these inequities that we see in our society. So the last thing we're going to talk about is ourself. And I think that outside of this idea that we can improve and outside of this idea that we have insurmountable problems in our world that we want to fix, a lot of people are very insecure about it. They often think, who am I to be a change maker, right? Who are you to be anyone? To be a hero, to be someone who actually makes change, to stand up to bullies or oppressors. Who are you? And I think that there are a lot of people who look in the mirror and judge themselves really harshly. They judge every shortcoming they have, they judge everything they haven't done. And we are so unkind to ourselves. We often have very almost limitless forgiveness for other people sometimes. But when it comes to ourselves, we don't accept any failure. We don't accept any shortcoming, and we beat ourselves up for it. I'm from the Midwest, and I think there are a lot of people in here who have imposter syndrome and who aren't confident in themselves, and I don't know why. Like we, for some reason, culturally have no avenues of really building confidence in ourselves and each other, and I don't know. It's unfortunate because really everyone is vitally important. And I don't just say that as like a feel-good sentence. It's just any person who's swinging a hammer at that wall is insurmountably valuable. And when you understand the value of little contributions amongst a lot of people over time, you understand how valuable everyone is, and that's you too. You are included in that. But maybe we aren't as big as we want to be, as strong as we want to be, as fast or talented or wealthy enough to make the change we want. Yeah, we probably aren't. We're probably not that great. That's most of us, though, and that's the good news. There's a book, there's an author, Terry Pratchett, one of my favorite authors, and they wrote the Discworld series, and I have a skill for you that is looking at two of the books, two of the characters, and we have Color of Magic, the movie Color of Magic on the left with the tourist, Flower, and the wizard Rincewind. And on the right, we have the last hero. which I forget offhand. It's not Conan, it's a combination of Conan and something else, but I forget offhand. This is not a perfect presentation, it doesn't have to be. I'm just being honest with where I'm at. But these characters, Conan, or whatever their actual name is the greatest hero the Discworld has ever seen. They are the legendary hero that can accomplish anything they want to. They are old because they are successful as a hero. Nothing has ever taken them out, and they've been a hero their entire life. They're the ones that slay the dragons. They're the ones that defeat the evil wizard. They are the hero. Our left shows us the tourist and the wizard who's a coward. Doesn't even know magic, really, depending on what books you're reading. And where do you see yourself on this scale? Do you see yourself closer to being a coward, a wizard who can't cast magic, or a tourist on our left, and a tourist that doesn't know what they're doing or talking about? Or do you see yourself closer to being the greatest hero of all time, or even just a hero? And this isn't a binary scale. I'm sure that a lot of you are somewhere in the middle and maybe have parts of yourself that you think are heroic, parts of yourself that you think are cowardly. I think we're complex people. That's fine. But I think that when we are looking at this, I think a lot more people identify a lot closer to being a coward or a tourist than a hero. And in the book Light Fantastic, there's a sequence where the world is ending. The evil wizard has achieved their goal to destroy the world, and Rincewind and Twoflower are climbing up the Tower of Magic to see what they can do. And Rincewind's against this. They're the wizard, they're the coward, and they asked Twoflower, what are we doing here? We have no chance against this. This is silly for us to try. We are the fodder, we are inconsequential, we are the losers. What are we doing here? And Twoflower asks him, well, who should be doing this? And Rincewind says, well, the Conan, the hero, we need to wait for them to show up to save us. And then Twoflower goes, well, are they here? And Rincewind goes, no. Twoflower basically responds, then we're the best there is right now. The people who show up are the most important every time. Because, yeah, there are people smarter than me, and probably whoever's listening to this, there are people more capable and talented, but are they there in that room fighting for the change you're fighting for? Because if they're not, they don't matter. Even if they're the greatest hero of all time, if they are not there to save us, they do not matter. What matters is us, the people in the room trying to make change. We are de facto the best for the job if we're the only ones doing it. I never identified as a hero growing up or across my life. I identified with the losers, the scum. That's how I saw myself, and to a point still do. But how I framed it in the beginning with my resume of my shortcomings or things I failed in my life, it's because you don't have to be great to make change. You don't have to be great to be a hero. That's the point. Anyone can. That's the point. The kind of hero that we saw in The Last Hero, that kind of hero doesn't exist. As I said, the only thing that matters is the people in the room. And so long as you're trying to make change, you are the right person for the job. People have imposter syndrome and feel, oh, someone else could be doing this better. Where are they? Because they're not there. Sure, if they are in that room, if they can come to our state or come to the rescue of the fight you're working for, yeah, let them lead. If they're great, they're not here. They never are. It's just us. All heroes are just people who try. We might not win our fights, but as long as we try, that generates hope and is what allows us to create change. Everything's impossible until we try, and then through that effort, we can make it possible. As long as we can understand ourselves and our role in that fight. So bringing this all together, bringing these ideas together about how to keep hope while fighting for change. The summary is walls. That's everything you do matters. You gotta fall in love with the process. Anything you do to make the world better matters. Limits. Problem solve with what tools you have, not which you don't. Just anything you can do to attack that wall matters. If you don't have one of many things you feel like you need, what do you have that you can actually use to leverage? Because a lot of the time it's something. And then you are good enough to make change. All that matters is that you try. I'm not going to promise that following this means that we're going to change the world and everything's going to be better. Our problems today are scary. That's accepting reality. But that doesn't mean they're hopeless. No feeling is final, and no society has ever lasted forever. All the problems we have today we've seen historically before, as in today, we have the opportunity to be what history needs of us. The ending message that I have for folks in this work, because these are ideas about processes and alignment. It's not how you achieve any particular thing, but to empower you to know that you can achieve anything, or at least you can work on it, is I guess what I mean. When the world feels big, focus on small things you can do. And when it feels small, focus on the hundreds doing work all across our state and community. As much as you can, be kind to yourself and be kind to others, and know hope is something that we create. We create hope through trying. Anything we do to attack that wall, anything we do to leverage change, any ways that we see ourselves as change makers creates hope and matters. That's how you can create hope. That's how you can maintain resiliency, even when we seem like we're fighting impossible problems, because that's how you make things possible in the first place. And the last lesson, as your Midwestern suicide prevention advocate, is that no matter the struggle, never forget that hope is 75% of the way to hope. I came up with this a while ago. I know other people have used it since then, but I have this in trainings from 3 years ago, just to let you know. But I think that I try to balance a very fine line between acknowledging the struggles we have, but not being hopeless in the face of them. I do honestly believe things can get a lot better, and I don't think they are impossibly far away. I don't think they're magically getting better. I think it's going to take a ton of work and a ton of people, but I think that we as people want to heal, and I think that we as people are getting pretty sick of all the fighting. One of the books that really inspired me was A Once and Future King, and it's a book that has a proposition that people are better than they are evil. They're more good than they are evil, as kind of simple ideas. Because if you don't believe that, then you should just give up. And I think it requires us believing that we can be better, and believing in each other and ourselves, that we can get there, that we can show ourselves grace and show other people mercy, to find connection points again instead of points of division. And there are people like me selling this message still, that haven't given up despite growing up in North Dakota, despite the work I do with suicide prevention, despite the feelings I've had of hopelessness and how many times life didn't set me up to succeed. There are people like me out there, and there are many more people than just me. I see hundreds of people across just North Dakota, thousands of people doing work all the time, making sacrifices they don't have to, for other people. When you look around and know how to find it, you can find ways to believe again. And that's the work I want to put out there, and that's how I want people to understand their place in it. So that's what I have for you for my training today about keeping hope while fighting for change. I hope you found it useful. And know that this stuff takes a really long time. Take a week off, like drink water, take care of yourself. That's why that's important, because it's always so much more important for you to survive and find joy as your contributions to this work first. And then when you have the time and energy to add anything more, all of it matters. Joy is as much a part of the fight as anything else, and keeping yourself safe and alive through it is important and vital. So take care of yourself as much as you can, and have a good rest of your whatever.